I never thought I'd be the guy to get blindsided like this, but here I am, staring at the wreckage of what I believed was a solid marriage. My name's Mark, and I've been with Lisa for about 5 years. We met in college, hit it off pretty quickly, and for a while I really thought we had something real. She was smart, ambitious, a little bitchy sometimes, sure, but I liked her fire. She had this way of arguing that I couldn't quite pin down, like she was always hiding something beneath her sharp tongue. Still, I trusted her, or at least I did until recently. Everything started feeling off a few months ago. She'd be distant, making excuses about work, but I could tell she was hiding something. She'd come home late, sometimes smelling different, like she'd been somewhere else entirely. I tried to brush it off. I figured maybe she was just busy or stressed. But then I noticed her phone more often, locking it when I got close, texting in secret, and deleting messages with a speed that would make a spy jealous. Little things, but enough to make me suspicious. Honestly, I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind, like maybe I was just paranoid. One night I decided to do a little digging. I've never been the snooping type, but the gut instinct was gnawing at me. I checked her email, nothing too revealing, just her usual work stuff and some flirty messages with her boss. But then I found a strange email, one that made my stomach drop. It was from some guy named Chris, and the subject line was DNA banking consultation urgent. I clicked on it, thinking it might be some work-related thing, but it was more than that. It was about her supposedly helping this guy with a genetic diversity preservation project. It sounded legit on the surface, but the timing was strange. It was during the same week she'd been acting weird, and the location was listed as a secure seed vault facility, one I'd never even heard of before. That's when I put two and two together. Chris wasn't just some work buddy. He was her new project partner, and from what I could gather, they'd been meeting at these seed vaults, places meant for preserving genetic material, stored safely deep underground. I read through some of the emails and realized they'd been in contact for months, apparently planning these DNA banking sessions. The way she talked about it like it was this big, secret thing really set me off. It wasn't just a work thing. It was something more, something sneaky. I didn't confront her right away. I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. She had been lying to me the whole time, right under my nose, about her work, and I had no idea. The worst part. I remembered her smirking whenever she'd lie about her plans, acting innocent but clearly hiding something. She'd always been a bit bitchy. She knew how to twist words and make herself sound innocent. But this time, I could see her guilt plain as day. She thought she could keep it hidden forever, but I was not going to let her get away with this. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and honestly, kind of stupid for not seeing it sooner. How long had she been sneaking around? Who was this Chris? Was it just about these DNA sessions, or was there something more, something sexual? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the signs pointed there. She was clearly lying when I caught her in a small lie about her work trips, saying she was visiting a client. But now I knew the truth. She was cheating, and she'd been hiding it in the most bizarre place possible, at secret vaults with some guy I'd never heard of. It was surreal. The thing is, I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I needed to plan carefully. I couldn't just accuse her without proof, and I definitely didn't want to blow up everything without thinking. But inside, I was boiling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. How could she be so cold, so calculating? All those years we'd spent building a life, and she was out there doing DNA banking sessions with some guy, probably fucking him too. It felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet, and I was caught in the middle of this mess I never saw coming. After spending a restless night turning over everything in my mind, I decided I had to get more concrete evidence before I made any moves. I couldn't just go in accusing her based on some suspicious emails. That would only make me look crazy, and I'd rather have her caught red-handed if I was going to confront her. So I started setting a trap. I knew her routine enough by now. She liked to go for her morning jogs, which I'd always thought was her way of clearing her head. I decided to follow her that morning, just to see where she was really headed. It was early before sunrise, and I slipped out of bed quietly. She was still sleeping, her breathing even, her hair a mess from sleep. I grabbed my coat, slipped my phone into my pocket, and quietly left the house. The streets were quiet, but I managed to keep my distance behind her as she headed out. Sure enough, she turned off her usual route and headed toward a secluded part of town I'd never really paid attention to. It was a bit of an industrial area, with some abandoned buildings and a large, underground-looking facility. I didn't recognize it, but I knew she'd been there before based on her emails. I parked a few blocks away, watching from behind some trees, hiding my signal from her view. After about an hour, I saw her come out with a guy, Chris, I assumed, carrying a small bag. They looked intimate, like they'd been planning something. She was laughing at his stupid jokes, touching his arm a little too casually. It was the confirmation I needed. This wasn't just some project, it was something sexual, maybe even more than that. They were meeting up regularly in secret, in some underground vault meant for storing genetic samples, and she was doing who knows what with this guy. I didn't want to make a scene yet, so I just watched and took pictures on my phone, proof enough I'd need later. I felt sick, honestly. The betrayal cut deep. I always thought I knew her, but it turns out she'd been playing me for months. She lied about her work, lied about her trips, and now I was watching her cheat on me in a facility that was supposed to be about saving genetic diversity. The irony was sickening. When she finally got into her car and drove off, I followed at a safe distance. I needed to see where she went afterward. Turns out, she drove to a nearby hotel, one I'd never even knew she used, where she met Chris again. They were in that room for hours. I didn't need more proof, it was obvious what was happening. She wasn't just working on some scientific project. She was cheating, plain and simple. My mind raced through all the possible ways to handle this. Part of me wanted to storm in there, confront her right then and there, yell at her, break down, whatever. But I knew I had to be smart. If I stormed into that hotel, I'd be risking everything. Her denying it, her throwing me out, things getting ugly fast. So I kept my distance, took a few more photos, and waited until she left. When she finally did, I followed her home, just to see what she'd say when I finally got the courage to face her. Sitting in my car outside her house, I felt a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and confusion. How could she do this to us? After everything, she was out there, screwing around in secret, lying to my face while pretending to be the perfect wife. Part of me wanted to break down, to yell at her, to demand answers right then. But I knew I had to keep my cool, at least for now. I thought about all her lies, all her sneaky manipulations, and I realized that the woman I thought I knew was gone. This wasn't just some affair. It was a calculated betrayal, a slap in the face to everything we had built. I kept telling myself I needed a plan, something that would hit her where it hurt most. I thought about her DNA banking obsession, about all the times she talked about science and preservation. That's when a dark idea started forming. I wouldn't confront her with anger and accusations. No, I'd do something smarter. If she loved her work, her projects, then I'd hit her where it mattered, something involving her obsession with genetic diversity, her precious vaults, her secret meetings. I'd plan to be patient, let her keep thinking she's safe, and then strike back. I wanted her to see that her lies and infidelity wouldn't go unpunished. That night I sat in my own house, processing everything. My heart was heavy, but a small flame of revenge flickered inside me. I knew I wouldn't let her get away with this. I would find a way to make her regret ever cheating on me, to make her understand that her lies had consequences. I didn't know exactly how I'd do it yet, but I knew I had to be strategic, careful, and ready to act when the moment was right. And so I started digging into her project, trying to understand what made her so obsessed with those vaults, with that DNA banking nonsense. I wanted to know her weak spots, her motivations, her vulnerabilities, so I could use them against her. The betrayal cut deep, but I was determined not to let her win. This wasn't just about catching her cheating. It was about reclaiming what was mine and showing her that she couldn't run away with some secret lover and expect to get away with it. Not on my watch. In the days that followed, I threw myself into research, trying to understand what exactly her obsession with DNA banking and those underground vaults was about. I knew her type. She was ambitious, maybe a little bitchy, but she had her passions. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that her work was more than just a career move. It was her escape, her secret world where she could hide her real activities. That's when I started digging into the company she worked for, the so-called Genetic Diversity Preservation Initiative. I needed to find out if there was anything there I could use. Turns out, her company had a lot of secret projects, some that weren't even listed on their official site. I spent hours online, digging through forums, trying to piece together what exactly those vaults stored. It was fascinating and disturbing. They weren't just storing seeds or genetic samples for conservation. No, they were also apparently used for secret research, maybe even reproductive experiments. The kind of stuff you'd expect in a sci-fi movie. And from what I saw, they were conducting these DNA banking sessions in underground facilities, far away from prying eyes. The more I learned, the angrier I got. She was out there, literally in a vault, with some guy I'd never even heard of, possibly doing God knows what with genetic material that could be worth millions, or dangerous if misused. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a betrayal of science, of trust, of everything I thought we stood for. My mind kept circling back to that. What exactly had she been doing with Chris? Were they just fooling around, or was there something more? I kept telling myself slow and steady wins the race. I had to be patient. One night I decided I needed to see her secret life in action. I set up a little surveillance. I followed her again to that same underground vault facility, this time in my car, parking a few blocks away. I watched as she entered with Chris, and they went down some stairs into a secured door. I couldn't hear what was happening inside, but the way they moved, like they belonged there, confirmed my suspicion. She was in deep. I sat there for hours, feeling the weight of betrayal crush me. She lied about everything, her work, her trips, her fidelity. I kept remembering her bitchy attitude, her sneers, how she'd always act like she was better than me. And now I knew she'd been lying about her whole life. What hurt most was realizing that her obsession with her DNA projects was a cover for her infidelity, that she could so easily manipulate her work and her reputation to hide what she was really doing. I'd always thought she was ambitious, but now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulator, a liar, a cheater. I needed to plan my next move carefully. I couldn't just walk into her secret vault and accuse her of everything. That would blow my cover and she'd probably deny everything. No, I had to do something smarter. I needed leverage, something that she'd value more than anything. Her obsession with her project gave me an idea. If her work was so important to her, then I'd use it against her. I'd find a way to expose her secret affair in a way that she couldn't deny, but also in a way that would make her feel just how much she'd lost. I started thinking about how to turn her own obsession into her downfall. Maybe I could leak some of her secret emails, stuff involving her meetings, her DNA sessions, to the press or her colleagues. Or maybe I could hack her work files if I got the chance. I knew her password, at least for her work email, from some past arguments. I was planning my attack, knowing I had to strike when she least expected it. Meanwhile, my feelings were a roller coaster. One moment I was furious and wanted to smash everything, confront her immediately, break her in half. The next, I felt a deep sadness, wondering how I had been so blind, how I had trusted her for so long. Seeing her with Chris, knowing she'd been unfaithful, was like a punch to the stomach. I kept replaying the moments she lied, the little smirks, the way she dismissed my concerns. All of it added up to one thing. She'd been playing a game with my life, and I was just a pawn in her scheme. I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. Not without consequences. I was starting to see that this wasn't just about infidelity. It was about her betraying everything we stood for, her integrity, her honesty. And I was going to make sure she paid for it, one way or another. I'd been patient enough, gathering information, watching her slip deeper into her deception. Now it was time to set my plan in motion. I had to outsmart her, expose her lies, and make her regret ever crossing me. That was the only way I could get some sense of justice back, even if it meant destroying what little trust I had left. Over the next few days, I kept gathering whatever I could, screenshots, emails, little snippets of her texts. I knew I couldn't just show up and accuse her without a solid case. That wouldn't work. Instead, I wanted her to realize I knew everything, that I had been watching her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The plan was simple in my head. I'd leak some of her communication, make her see I'd been systematically exposing her lies, and watch her reactions unravel. I wanted her to feel the panic, the betrayal she inflicted on me, reflected back in her own eyes. I spent hours hacking into her work email, nothing complicated, just enough to find some incriminating stuff. She'd always used the same password for everything, which was stupid, but that was her. I found what I needed: some detailed plans for these secret DNA sessions, references to Chris, and some encrypted messages about the vaults. I even found her talking about a backup plan if something went wrong, which told me she was already worried about getting caught. The fact that she was planning her cover-up just made me more determined to push her into a corner. I drafted a plan to leak some of her emails and messages anonymously to her coworkers and her boss, making sure she'd get the message loud and clear that I knew her secrets. I wanted her to realize I had all the ammunition I needed. I knew I'd have to be careful. If she found out I was behind it, she'd double down, maybe even destroy evidence or try to turn the tables. So I set up a burner email account, made sure all traces were gone, and began sending snippets, carefully selected to hit her where it hurt most: her pride, her reputation, and her obsession with her projects. When the emails started circulating, I watched her face change. One minute she was calm and bitchy, dismissing my concerns, and the next, her expression shifted into pure panic. I saw her trying to cover her tracks, deleting messages, calling Chris, probably trying to figure out how I got hold of her stuff. I admit, part of me felt a sick satisfaction. She was finally getting a taste of her own medicine. She'd always lied, always manipulated, and now her own lies were being used against her. That was poetic justice, I thought. Fallout came fast. Her colleagues, who had always respected her, started questioning her in meetings. Her boss called her into his office, probably about the strange emails and her secret meetings at the vaults. I saw her trying to act innocent, texting and calling Chris frantically, but it was too late. The damage was done. She was exposed as a liar, a cheat, someone who was willing to betray everything for some secret affair and her obsession with genetic preservation. I could see her crumbling, and honestly, part of me felt relieved. I'd finally stripped her of that smug, bitchy facade she always wore. But the thing that struck me most was her reaction. She was furious, clearly humiliated, and trying to spin her way out of it. She kept lying, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that she was just helping Chris with his project, that it was strictly professional. She tried to accuse me of stalking and spying, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Her arrogance was falling apart, piece by piece, and I saw the cracks in her perfect little facade. That was when I realized I had her cornered. She could deny all she wanted, but the truth was out and her lies couldn't hold up anymore. In the quiet moments afterward, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. I had finally exposed her, but it didn't bring the satisfaction I thought it would. Instead, I felt hollow, betrayed myself. How could I have been so blind? How could she lie to my face for so long? I kept replaying everything: her sneering attitude, her dismissiveness, and now I saw her for what she was: a manipulator, a liar, a cheat who used her obsession with her work to hide her infidelity. It was almost poetic how her own secrets had turned against her, but it didn't erase the pain. That part was still raw. I decided then I couldn't stay in this marriage. Not after discovering she'd been unfaithful with Chris, hiding it in those vaults, lying about everything. The betrayal was too deep. I thought about confronting her directly, but honestly, I didn't see the point anymore. She was losing her grip, and I knew I had to act fast before she tried to cover her tracks further. I had to make her see that her lies had consequences, that her obsession with her project had blinded her to what really mattered: us, the trust we once had, that she threw away in her pursuit of some secret, twisted ambition. That night I packed a bag. I didn't tell her where I was going. I just left a note saying I needed time to think. I knew I couldn't stay, not with her still out there, possibly planning her next move. I felt a strange mix of anger, heartbreak, and relief. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted and built a life with, was gone. replaced by this scheming, bitchy, manipulative stranger. I had to start over, rebuild myself, and learn from this nightmare. But one thing was clear: I'd never trust her again. And honestly, I didn't want to. Not after this. Do you want me to keep going? The days that followed were a blur of confusion, anger, and a strange sense of liberation. I stayed with a friend for a while, just needing space from everything. The house felt cold and empty without her there, but part of me felt lighter, like I'd finally lifted a heavy weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. I kept replaying everything: her lies, her sneers, her secret meetings at the vaults, Chris's stupid grin, all of it. It was like I'd been asleep, and now I'd finally woken up to the nightmare I'd been blind to for so long. The first thing I did was get legal advice. I knew I had to protect myself, especially considering how dirty she was willing to play. I started gathering all the evidence I had: screenshots, emails, photos, everything I could use to support my case if I decided to split. I looked into divorce options, and honestly, I didn't care if it was messy. She'd lied to me, cheated on me, and used her work as a cover for some illicit affair. She was the only one who had broken our vows, and I was done pretending everything was okay. But I also knew I needed to confront her one last time, face to face. I wanted to see her reaction, her real, raw reaction, when she finally understood that I knew everything. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of lying her way out of this again. I decided to meet her at her place, but I was prepared for anything. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just some fool who got played. No, I was a man who had finally taken control of the situation. When I arrived at her house, she was already there, packing nervously, her face pale and strained. She tried to act tough, but I could see the cracks in her facade. I laid the evidence on the table: screenshots of her emails, pictures I'd taken, copies of her texts, everything that proved she'd been lying, cheating, and hiding her activities. Her bitchy attitude vanished in an instant. Instead, her eyes widened in pure panic. She stammered, trying to come up with excuses, claiming she was helping Chris with some research, that it was all just professional. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I knew the truth, that she'd been unfaithful, that her obsession with her DNA projects was just a cover-up for her betrayal. I told her how she'd lied about everything, how she'd manipulated her way into my life and now expected me to just forgive her. But I wasn't going to be that guy anymore. She had pushed me too far. I said I was done, that I was filing for divorce, and that I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. Her reaction was priceless. She looked stunned, then furious, then defeated. She kept repeating that I didn't understand, that it was all a misunderstanding, that she loved her work more than anything. But I saw through her bullshit. I saw the bitchy, manipulative woman she really was, the woman who'd used her projects and her obsession with genetic preservation as a shield for her own selfish needs. I told her I didn't want to hear her lies anymore. I was done with her games. I was finished pretending. The betrayal had broken whatever little trust I had left. I told her to pack her things, to leave and never come back. She tried to argue, cry, even plead, but I knew I'd already made up my mind. The aftermath was messy, but honestly, I felt a strange sense of relief. I had finally taken control of my life, and I knew I'd come out of this stronger. I learned that trust is fragile, and that sometimes the people closest to you can betray you in the most shocking ways. I realized that even the most ambitious, bitchy woman I knew was capable of deception on a scale I never imagined. It hurt like hell, but I also understood that I deserved better. Now I'm slowly rebuilding. I've cut all contact with her, moved on, and started focusing on myself again. It hurts to remember what I lost, but I know I'll get past it. The lesson I take from all this is simple: never ignore the signs. Trust your instincts and don't let anyone use your love or your life as a cover for their secret lies. Be cautious. Be sharper. Because some betrayals run deep, and only you can decide your own worth afterward. Do you want me to finish the story? Looking back, I realized that this whole experience changed me in ways I never expected. I used to think I was a trusting guy, maybe too naive, but now I see the importance of being cautious. Trust should be earned, not given blindly. The Betrayal by Lisa was a brutal lesson on how someone's ambition and obsession can blind them to what's truly important. Her DNA banking sessions, her secret meetings in those vaults, those weren't just about genetics or saving the planet. They were about her sneaking around, sneering at the very relationship she claimed to cherish. Getting rid of her was like shedding a second skin. It was painful, sure, but also oddly freeing. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was genuinely reclaiming myself. I'm still healing, still trying to piece everything back together, but I've learned not to let betrayal define me. Instead, I see it as a jarring wake-up call, one that made me more aware of red flags I might have ignored before. I learned the importance of standing up for myself, of recognizing when someone's lying and taking action before it's too late. There's a strange clarity I've gained from all this. I understand now that people can hide their true motives behind a veneer of professionalism and ambition, and if you're not careful, you'll be blindsided by something you never saw coming. Trust must be balanced with caution. You need to know what someone's really after, what they're willing to sacrifice or hide. I wish I'd been more skeptical earlier, but I also realize that I can't change the past. I can only move forward, wiser and more guarded. As I sit here reflecting, I want to share a final piece of advice to anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. Never ignore the warning signs. If your gut tells you something is wrong, don't brush it off. Dig deeper, ask questions, and don't be afraid to confront uncomfortable truths. People can hide their lies very well, but in the end, truth tends to surface. Be prepared for it, and don't let someone else's obsession or ambition destroy your life. Protect yourself, trust wisely, and remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to walk away. I don't regret what happened because it taught me resilience. It showed me my worth and that I deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect. I've come out of this battered but stronger, ready to rebuild a life I can trust again, alone if I have to. Because in the end, no one should settle for a partner who only pretends to love them, especially when they're busy hiding their real life, one filled with lies, betrayal, and secret vaults. I hope anyone reading this learns to listen to their instincts, because betrayal often wears a disguise, and sometimes the only way to save yourself is to realize that some people, no matter how much you love them, just aren't worth the damage they cause. Thanks for reading.